Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today I wanted to talk about some poetry because it is Poetry Thursday and I haven't done that in a while, and I wanted to get back to it. Because, poetry is always fun to read, and I shouldn't neglect my poetic findings out there, or whatever, I'm kind of rambling on at this point. But today I wanted to talk about a poem about a waterbed and the uncomfortableness or the mystique of a waterbed. I am referring to Waterbed by Elizabeth Smither. For those who don't know, and that would include me, Elizabeth Smither is a New Zealand author, known mainly for writing poetry, but also one or two short stories in her time. She's written a number of collections of poetry, getting them published since the 1980s, and she's won a number of awards in her time too, mostly New Zealand-based awards, but that's still significant because the country has deemed her an important person. So that's pretty much all I know about Elizabeth Smither. As is sometimes the case on Poetry Thursdays, there's a lot of poets out there who publish poetry, but not a lot is known about them, or they just don't have an extensive bio because, I think poetry is like if you just do poetry and you don't write books, like people, there's just a sense that maybe you're not trying to get your name out there or something like that. But who is to say what's the deal with Elizabeth Smither? So without further ado, let's talk about Waterbed. I will do a little summary, a little analysis, and we will move on from there. And by summary, I of course mean I'm going to read the poem. Sleeping on a waterbed. I think I'd prefer the straight, stiff bed in your other spare room, but it's covered with books and a typewriter. Already I'm calculating how in the night I'll get up out of the waterbed, out of the waves, and come and let the typewriter off and the books. So I lie down dead center with the duvet, which is the color of water seen through wharf slats, that unbelievable turquoise, so deep and sinister. And nothing happens until I turn, and in my ear an immediate susurration, a tiny curled up and released wave, that a shell perfectly gauged to my weight and my turning releases to run to the edge of the mattress as if a shore awaits by the boards. Amazed, I turn onto my other side. This is like swimming and holding the mouth agape. In the protection of an arm, again the shoreward sound, the perfection of the sea-simulated measure for measure. Terms of analysis, there's a little bit to talk about with this poem. As to what it's about, it's pretty straightforward. The narrator is visiting a friend, possibly a writer, because they have books and a typewriter on their bed, their spare bed at that. And they're noting how, although they don't mind sleeping on the waterbed, they would prefer another room. And then they go into detail about how unusual the waterbed is. And so something that comes to mind is the way she describes the water. Usually when people describe water or like the color of water, it's beautiful, like aquamarine or something like that. But here she describes it in a different way. She says, with the duvet, which is the color of water seen through wharf slats, that unbelievable turquoise, so deep and sinister, and that's very interesting. It draws my eye, it sticks out. To call the water unbelievable turquoise, it's hard to imagine how deeply blue something must be for it to be unbelievable, and then to call it deep and sinister, to get an unsettling feeling from the color of water, that seems pretty significant. And so it only adds to the narrator's unease with using the waterbed. And then how she describes the waterbed like she's on a beach, or like they're swimming in an ocean. It says, perfectly gauged to my weight and my turning, releases to run to the edge of the mattress as if a shore awaits by the boards. And this is like swimming and holding the mouth agape and the protection of an arm. Again, the shoreward sound, the perfection of the sea-simulated measure for measure. And so it does sound beautiful near the end of the poem, but to experience that the entire night, especially if you're someone like me who tosses and turns pretty frequently, like you're going to be hearing that sound. It's going to feel like you're swimming the whole night. And like if you were already uncomfortable with the idea of a waterbed, I'm sure that's not going to make it any easier. So I do like how the narrator kind of makes this uncomfortable like scenario sound pretty beautiful, and the way she describes the water, it makes for a pretty lovely poem. So yeah, that's what I noticed there. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Sleeping on a Waterbed by Elizabeth Smither. A pretty good poem, a pretty short poem, not too much to discuss, but still worth looking at, worth exploring. I'm going to put a link to it in the description so that you can find it, and let's talk about it. Make sure to comment below if something about my review or something about the poem catches your eye, and we can talk about it. I would love to do that. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find out about Elizabeth Smither and her interesting poetry, as well as Poetry Thursday, get more people talking about poetry. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and tossy and turny travels. Farewell.